mind. Like you knew what they were really thinking, even if they weren't saying it.
It's like a sixth sense, right?
Yeah. Turns out we all have that ability in a way. We're talking about body language.
The secret language we all speak without even realizing it.
And today we're going deep, deep into that world with this book
I Can Read You Like a Book.
by Gregory Hartley and Marianne Coringe.
Now, these authors, they're not just some self-help gurus. These guys trained the FBI.
No kidding.
Fortune 500 execs, too. They taught them how to read people like a book.
So what's the secret?
Well, they break communication down into 3 channels:
Okay.
verbal, vocal, and nonverbal.
So the words themselves, how we say them,
And then everything else.
the body language.
Right. And most people, they only focus on the first 2. What we say, how we say it.
But it's that nonverbal channel that really gives the game away.
Exactly. That's where the truth leaks out, even if someone's words are carefully chosen.
Like a poker player trying to bluff with a straight face, but their legs bouncing under the table.
Perfect example. They can control their words, maybe even their tone of voice.
Yeah.
But that leg, that's their body betraying them.
So someone's always leaking information, even if they don't mean to.
Exactly. It's our primal communication system, much harder to consciously control.
Okay, so I have a confession. I'm a world-class fidgeter.
I knew it.
Does that mean I'm lying all the time?
Not necessarily, and that's where this idea of baseline behavior is key.
Baseline.
Think of it like, remember The Usual Suspect?
Great movie.
Kevin Spacey's character, right? He fooled everyone with his act.
Because he seems so nervous and fidgety, right?
That's it. But that was his trick. Because his normal self, his baseline, was actually super calm, cool, collected.
So he created this whole persona to throw people off.
Exactly. Baselining is about knowing what's normal for that specific person. How do they usually act?
So you can spot the deviations, the changes that actually mean something.
You got it. Once you know someone's baseline, you can start to see those subtle cues, the things that are out of character.
That's fascinating. Okay, so say I have a coworker. Usually they're pretty stoic, pretty reserved.
Right.
But then suddenly they're super animated, talking with their hands, really expressive.
That's a clue.
Yeah.
Something's up. That's not their usual baseline.
Okay, so we've got to factor in this baseline idea, but there's something else that can really complicate things too.
What's that?
Culture. I mean, I've definitely had my share of cultural misunderstandings.
Oh, tell me about it. Body language is not universal.
Like, I once hugged a colleague from Japan, and, well, let's just say he wasn't expecting it.
Yeah. Physical touch, personal space, it all varies so much from culture to culture. The book actually has a whole section on Texans
Oh boy, here we go.
and how their mannerisms are often misinterpreted.
Well, being from Texas, I can confirm sometimes we are a little much.
But it's not about too much. It's about understanding where it comes from,
The context.
right? You think about Texas, right? Historically, pioneers, cowboys, people who had to be bold, assertive to survive.
He didn't have time for small talk.
Exactly. So those traits, they kind of get ingrained, passed down,
Part of the culture.
and it shows up in the body language.
Yeah.
Direct eye contact, firm handshakes, even the way they might speak a little louder. It's not aggression, necessarily.
It's confidence. At least that's what we tell ourselves.
But you see how it could be misconstrued if you don't understand that cultural background.
Absolutely. Okay, so culture adds like a whole other layer on top of everything else we're already trying to decipher.
It's like those Russian nesting dolls. You keep uncovering more and more layers.
So how do we even begin to make sense of it all? Where do we start?
Well, the face is a good place to begin.
The face.
Yeah, it's like a billboard for our emotions.
All right.
Hartley and Coringe, they call it a billboard of emotions. Even when we try to hide what we're feeling, our faces tend to give us away.
It's true. We've all had those moments, right? Where you try to keep a straight face, but you can't help but react.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like that split-second eyebrow raise you mentioned earlier.
The eyebrow flash.
Yeah. It's such a subtle gesture, but it speaks volumes.
It's like a universal sign for, hey, I recognize you.
Right. And it's not just about recognition. Research suggests we even use it subconsciously to gauge trustworthiness.
Yeah.
Think about it. If someone's telling you something important and their eyebrows don't even budge,
Seems kind of suspicious.
exactly, it could be a red flag that something's not quite right.
Wow. And to think I never even gave my eyebrows a second thought. What about our eyes themselves? I've always heard that dilated pupils mean someone's attracted to you.
It's true, dilated pupils can be a sign of attraction, but it's not always that simple. Our pupils, they dilate in low light, right, to let in more visual information.
Right.
So it's really about heightened awareness in general. Stress, interest, even cognitive overload.
So if I'm trying to explain something to someone and I see their pupils start to shrink, maybe it's time to switch gears.
Exactly. You're reading the room, picking up on those nonverbal cues to see if they're engaged.
This is fascinating. Okay, so we've got eyebrows, eyes. What about the mouth? I'm a chronic lip biter, especially when I'm stressed.
Ah, yes. Lip biting. A classic tell.
Does that mean I'm always stressed?
Well, it's definitely a sign that your brain is working overtime. It's like a pressure valve for mental exertion, a way to release nervous energy. So if you're making a tough decision or trying to remember something important,
Or listening to you talk about body language.
exactly.
Yeah.
Lip biting can be a sign that you're fully engaged, concentrating on processing information.
So we've got the face, a whole symphony of subtle signals. But what about the rest of the body?
Ah, yes. The body. Where do we even begin? It's a treasure trove of nonverbal communication.
Well, what about the classic crossed arms? Isn't that a sign that someone's closed off, defensive?
It's often interpreted that way.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's true. But remember, context is everything.
So someone could just be cold and trying to warm up.
Exactly. Or they're comfortable, just their natural posture. You can't just jump to conclusions based on one single gesture.
Makes sense. It's like anything else. There are rules, but there are always exceptions.
And that's what makes this so challenging, but also so fascinating. We're trying to decipher a code that's constantly evolving and changing.
Okay, so how about something like standing with your hands on your hips? That always strikes me as a power move.
It can be, absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially for men. That wide stance, hands on hips, it's a way of taking up space, asserting dominance.
But for women, it's a little different, right?
Often, yes. It can be seen as more of a fashion pose or a way of emphasizing curves. Again, it all comes back to context and cultural norms.
It's amazing how the same gesture can have completely different meanings depending on who's doing it.
It really is, and it highlights just how nuanced body language can be. Even seemingly insignificant gestures can speak volumes.
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, think about grooming behaviors,
Grooming.
like adjusting your hair or clothes, fidgeting with your jewelry.
Oh, right.
We often associate those behaviors with vanity or insecurity, but they can also be signs of what's called displacement activity.
Displacement activity.
It's a way of channeling nervous energy when we're feeling anxious or uncomfortable. So someone who's constantly fidgeting with their ring during a meeting, they might not be bored.
They could actually be super focused.
Exactly. Or nervous, or excited. It all depends on the individual and the context, which is why, once again, we need to consider that baseline behavior.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. Baselines, cultural differences, all these tiny gestures and what they might mean.
That's a lot to process.
It really is. So how do we actually put this into practice? I mean, am I supposed to be analyzing every little thing someone does from now on?
Well, you don't want to overthink it. It's
Yeah.
not about obsessing over every twitch and blink.
Okay, good. Because that sounds exhausting.
It's more about looking for those aha moments, those times when something just feels a little off.
Like when someone's words and their body are telling two different stories.
Exactly. Say you're in a meeting, right? And your colleagues praising this new proposal. They're like, this is brilliant. We have to do this. But you notice their arms are crossed. They keep glancing away. Maybe a little lip biting action going on.
Suspicious.
Right. Those nonverbal cues, they're whispering, I'm not so sure about this, even though their words are saying something else entirely.
It's like their body's trying to send a secret message.
And that's where the real detective work comes in. You got to ask yourself, what's the real story here?
Are they just nervous? Or maybe trying to please the boss even though they have doubts?
See? You're getting it. The more you practice this stuff, the better you get at reading between the lines.
It's like becoming a human lie detector.
In a way, yeah. But it's more than just catching liars. It's about understanding the full picture of what someone's communicating, even if they don't realize they're doing it.
So how do we get better at this?
Well, the book actually talks about how some people are masters at using body